All right, we are live on the webinar. So thanks for joining. I want to kick this off. We're gonna run our second part of our series around digital transformation. This month's topic is transforming the patient journey and reducing costs with AI, chatbots, and open source. And our guest again is Bill Gagnon. He is the director of digital transformation for Boston Children's Hospital. And I'll let Bill introduce himself. Hi, Bill. Welcome to the show again.
Great. Hi, Brian. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me back here. I appreciate it. Yes, I've been basically working in digital transformation since the mid 90s, working for companies such as Citigroup, GE, Cigna, and now recently Boston Children's Hospital. So I'm excited today to talk about the chatbot that we've deployed and other things that we're working on.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. And I'm Brian Anderson. I'm the CEO of Augusto Digital. We focus on digital transformation and software solutions in healthcare. And so we're working in this space with clients every day. So we're looking forward to this webinar here. So let's get this started. Why are we doing this? We believe that the advances in healthcare in the healthcare systems benefit all of us, and so we're trying to shine a light on digital transformation and why it's so important and such a big part of the changes that are happening today. And that if we do this right, we can help each other improve and all of us create a stronger health system for everyone. So that's why we're doing it. And again, I'm Brian Anderson and Bill Gagnon, and this is where we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about chatbots and some background, and we're going to talk about some of the catalysts and usage growth and some of these usage scenarios, what's going on with AI in this space and the future, what's going on with open source and kind of how Boston Children's Hospital is taking advantage of open source, talking about staffing and operations lessons learned, and then getting these quick wins and growing the adoption. And then we're going to have a Q&A session here. We're live today. So let's jump in here to some questions. I just lost my question sheet here. Apologize for that.
No worries.
Little technical glitch. Here we are. Hey, Bill, why don't you start by just sharing some background around your kind of usage of chatbots over the years and kind of why you've decided to implement one of these at Boston Children's.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things, as I mentioned, back in, since my career kind of kicked off in the mid 90s working in digital, as it all kind of started to grow from, basically nothing. We actually, started working on websites and doing all the different things. And when I transitioned over to GE, I learned a little bit, like we talked the last webinar, about all of the process mapping and going through and working with all the different departments that you work with and really kind of, mapping out their patient experience or the customer experience and finding out what are opportunities. And time over time at GE, at Cigna, and even now at Boston Children's Hospital, what really resonated is a tool that could actually provide information 24/7 that, could be, hopefully as empathetic as possible in the healthcare, environment, but something that would be able to, take a lot of the pain points away from the call center by getting calls for, different things like, where do I park? What time do I show up for my appointment? Where is the location? And all these different things, and how do I find this doctor? And so we actually implemented chat. And like I said, I've been doing this since I had online chat, or the chatbot in GE and also at Cigna, and then now more recently at Boston Children's Hospital.
Great. And let's talk a little bit about, the catalyst, like what led you to kind of improve your digital front door for Boston Children's, and what was the first reason that really drove like the implementation of this chatbot?
Sure. And again, it goes back to, when I first started in 2015 at Boston Children's Hospital, first thing I did is, start meeting with all of the different 18, service areas of the hospital and having working sessions with them. And as I mentioned in the last webinar, all the working sessions, basically we get all the key stakeholders together. We do a process mapping session, and we really point out opportunities for improvement. And time over time, as I mentioned, it was people were putting their hands up saying we just need more information to be delivered to the end user, which is either the patient family or even referring physicians, and sometimes even researchers. And one of the tools that I've had in my wheelhouse over the years is, working with the I go back to the old school of in chatbots, AIML, which is the old Alice product, which is the origination of heuristic learning back and forth. And we implement that tool, and I've made changes over the years to it. And so even now, recently at Boston Children's Hospital, we found that during these working sessions, what was really resonating is that we needed a quick win, something we could turn around real fast, but also that would be a real value add to end users. And the chatbot was something that we could literally spin up in an hour or two. We could put information into it, and really, it is like your online FAQs, but the way that if it's implemented properly, it can actually be, much like a real person chatting back and forth with the, end user.
Yeah, that's great. And so I have an example here, some information that you shared with us to kind of just give people like an example scenario. Let's walk through that together. So this
Sure.
is a page on your website, right? I think you're highlighting COVID-19.
Right. So really, just to kind of go back a little bit, we had the tool launched from 2018, and we did, it is healthcare. So I think that we all have to be kind of careful of, the tools that we, put into place. It's not a typical, retail online, e-commerce shop. And so with that, we want to make sure the tools we have are, HIPAA compliant, that we're actually having the right data being, put across to the end user, and not sharing any PHI information. And so we did a slow start. We started looking at all the different areas that people really resonated towards, and that's on our patient relations or experience area. So inside that area, we had the chatbot live for about a year and a half, and we had about 40,000 different responses onto it. And then back, in 2020 March, COVID came on strong, and we were in a real dilemma at the hospital because we had more than ever people. We were sending people home, and people were sending themselves to our website. It was kind of crazy because they needed the answers, right? Is my child's appointment going to happen? What do I do about a rare and unique condition? How do I reach out to people with this situation going on? And learning more information about COVID. And so our team got together and thought, we've got a great tool at our exposure. We have this online chatbot. And so we immediately went to all the operational staff in the department and talked with them and said, look, we can, we're already standing up a COVID specific website, for this, but we need to have a tool that's available 24/7. And we actually launched it within the third week of COVID, and we saw, calls to the call center just drop dramatically because a lot of the questions we were able to, to answer. And the nice thing about the tool we have being open source, it's something that on the back end that we can actually go in and program very quickly on a daily basis. So we're able to see the questions that it asked. We're able to see that it has about 95% answer ratio. And the nice thing is that any of the questions that we don't get to, we're able to email back the patient at the end of the day with the answer, and then also program that back into the tool.
Yeah. Well, let's go through this scenario here just to make sure it's concrete for everybody. So this is the COVID-19 specific site that you guys set up, right?
Yes, exactly.
And
Right. That's the homepage, and it leads you into the COVID. So as you can see here, it's unlike other chatbots that are out in the other websites. We do have to put a lot of disclaimers up on top because of making sure that they understand that it's not a real live person. We don't want to mislead anybody, but we also want to make sure that if it is an emergency or a medical emergency, that they call 911 or a person that can help out.
yeah, so it kind of starts with that, and then it turns into more of a conversation, right?
Right, exactly. And as you see here, this is a real life instance, so it's not very robotic. We made sure that when we putting questions into this tool, that it has over 10 different ways of answering it. We also have 10 different ways of asking that question because we make sure that are we using the right terminology? Are we using slang or abbreviated words that might be used to make sure we catch all of it? So as you can see here, they're looking for information about COVID-19. And this comes across as something that, as a real conversation, would be, the chatbot came back and said, absolutely can help. We have a comprehensive section on COVID-19 here, click here. So we're able to display links that they can actually go to, open up another window. They can actually show videos. We can show different images and different things like that through that. And the person actually came back, and this is actually a real live session that we actually recorded on this. So it's very helpful, vaccine information. And we, what we do is the program picks up all these different, terminologies and their keywords, and comes back with the response that, yes, we have parent, we have information for content for parents, providers, and the community. And then, it just kind of keeps that conversation going with them.
Yeah, and it leads them into helpful resources, right? And you're
Right.
trying to solve the problems for them through the chatbot to reduce the call.
Exactly. And the chatbot, as you can see here, it actually grew another tool out of this tool because in having this, we learned that people wanted to have, okay, well, I need a location of where do I get the vaccine? And so we immediately started building out a vaccine locating, tool that we actually had location wise. And we tied into the, to .gov. So we actually had all of that information, and we were able to, show them a map where they could click on it. But as you can see, with the tool is able to be a standalone on the desktop, so it still keeps working even as the web page is working in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is like the tool that you guys developed for finding
Yes,
different locations, right? So you're able to
exactly.
adapt and learn. Whereas a lot of times people will go to your website and you don't know exactly what they're doing. You have the analytics, but like this is much more informed because they're asking
Absolutely.
questions, right?
Absolutely right. We looked at the heat mapping after this, and it was a very structured path as opposed to sometimes when people are all over the place, because in healthcare there's a lot of different entry points, and a lot of times in a regular situation for like non-COVID world, people usually would come into the website for conditions and treatments and find out how to make an appointment. In COVID times, it was all about just different, like, okay, I need help and I need answers, and so this tool had this. What you're seeing here is interesting, is that the tool, we morphed it very quickly as a helpful tool online, but also we installed it on the back end of all of our people's frontline staff computers. The reason being is that when they receive phone calls from patients, everybody, basically at that point, they were being sent to work home, and the people that were, they had all of these different, tutorials that they had for all the information. Some they had books on fax numbers, some of them had the phone numbers, location information, but there wasn't a centralized location for all the data. And so by doing this tool, we built everything in there. So we immediately sent out, a desktop link to all of our frontline agents that do scheduling or just answer questions to the people that are calling in, and they were able to actually sit there and talk through and get the answers right away. The nice thing about this feature, and I'm probably probably jumping ahead to a question you're probably going to have on the future part of it, but you had helped us build out a new tool, because we found that after COVID, this tool was used so much by our call center, and it cut calls down by half, that they wanted a faster way of using the tool. And so we actually developed, and unknowingly, we developed for ADA compliance reasons, we developed a tool to be speech to text. And then we realized that that works the same way in our call center, because when the people are asked, if they're talking to the agent, the agent actually repeats what the question was into the tool, is already live on the desktop, and it turns around with the answer for the chatbot, and they're
Yeah.
able to tell them where the directions are and places to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that's all interesting. So like if I follow what you're saying, it's our team has partnered with you on this for a while now, and
Yes.
when you started using the chatbot, it was mostly focused on trying to solve the problem of a patient, a specific
Right.
use case, but it's really grown, right? It's patients, it's parents, it's referring physicians. You mentioned it's internal users, like you're mentioning this. The staff is
Yes.
using this. The agents are actually using the chatbot internally because
Right.
it's so helpful and it has
E-
all the information in it, right?
Exactly. And even right now, all of our 18,000 plus employee base is using it too on our intranet, because the nice thing about the way the tool is set up, it's think of it as like an aisle in the library, that each section is specific to itself. It can be attached to the whole library. You can look for everything, or you can look in specific sections. And so we have it set up for our employee base on different things, from either it's all the way down to the healthcare information. When the vaccine was a big topic point, even down to benefits and different things like insurance and all the questions that come up on that. So we have information that sits in a separate chatbot location just for that. So we have the ability to blend all the different questions and answers onto it, or we have the ability to segment down to deep dive in a specific area if they don't want to have the information shared across the platform.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a powerful tool. So like let's dive a little deeper into, you mentioned AI, right? And Alice being that, like this is not Chat GPT, right? Like
No,
you guys
no.
were using this before Chat GPT even came out. So like what do you
It's
see with the AI and Chat GPT and how all this plays together?
right. Well, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm aging myself on back using this back in like the mid '90s. When it came out, I saw that there was a big use for this, and it's always that, how do we actually reduce people's time online and get them to either acquire or to engage, or to work with us on some basis. And so the tool is, I've used it, like I mentioned. I had this being used when I was working at GE International. So we had this in many different languages, and they had the ability to select their choice and come in and talk to people about different things, from different finance tools or insurance tools. And at Cigna, the same thing. We did, replicated it, where we had it for based on your language use. So it was very flexible in the way the coding is. The way that this tool works off is, again, there was no this is a predecessor to Chat GPT. This is based on heuristic type of conversation back and forth, and it picks up on all of the different keywords and sentiments and actually pulls from the database. And so, which is even to this day, I think that people ask me, it's like, will you keep using this or will you migrate? I think there's always going to be a use case for this tool in particular because it's in a controlled environment, especially when you're dealing with healthcare, HIPAA, and personal health information. You've got to be very careful on the database that you're using, that the terminology is coming from on that. And so, whereas ChatGPT might be opened up to a larger database of information, ours is specific to what we've programmed, and that we're able to. We've had a lot of extensive work in the background, working with our legal and compliance to make sure that everything that we're responding to is actually the right answer to give. It doesn't give out healthcare information or medical advice. It gives out just the information of like how to find this, where to look, and where to go. So that's important. And so, we plan to keep using this version of it. Yes, there's parts of Boston Children's Hospital that are looking at ChatGPT for other types of medical support. But right now, this tool definitely has longevity, and we're even looking at doing more. We're looking at working with your team now and building a different module that escalates the chatbot session into a real live chat session with an agent that's available, because we've had so much of a need where people are last minute, they're driving to our area, and I know that people may not that are on the call may not have ever been to Boston, but if you've ever been to the Longwood area in Boston, it is not a place you want to be driving to, and you're always going to be notoriously late. Even if you're walking, you're going to be late. A lot of traffic. And so a lot of people end up going to the website, the chat agent pops up, and of course they're like, great, I'm going to be late for my appointment. So now we're connecting that back to the access center to say that, we want to either give a 15-minute leeway time or even update or change their appointment if it's available to them. So they need to talk to a live person.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And then let's talk just slightly about open source. Like you chose an open source tool. There's SaaS solutions out there for this kind of stuff. Why did you choose the open source?
So I've been kind of always a big fan of open source since the day it was available to us, because a couple of things. We are a nonprofit, and we don't have the large budgets. I mean, before Boston Children's, I came from many large corporate companies, and you had a budget to work with that you could actually bring in some different software. But it's challenging when you have a restricted type of a budget. And also, too, a lot of times the way that the hospital set up is that we have different tool sets that are available in different areas of the hospital. And, sometimes if you don't have, direct management of that, they may not use those tools. And so it can be frustrating if you're paying the bills on that. So ideally, we look for an open source solution for that reason, on the financial aspect of it, because we wanted something that was viable and not really put us in, a big debt, but also something that we could actually, I want to put the money into actually making it better. And open source allows us to actually build out the right modules in healthcare. And like many businesses, healthcare is not really much of a difference, but you always, you look at the software that you want to get, and it maybe meets 80% of your needs, and you still want to make sure it has the other 20%. But when you're with a software provider, you're one of many people that are putting in a request to change or modify that, and it may or may not happen. Whereas open source, we started working with your team and said, look, this is the things that we want to do. This is where we're gapped. Can you help us add on to that? And you were able to go in, modify the tool, and enhance it for us.
Yeah. So we continue to customize it to your needs, right? Specifically to your needs. So like, what are some of the customizations that come to mind for you that we were able to do really quickly?
Yeah, I think the first one is that, we did, I mentioned earlier when we were bouncing around the different sections, a lot of chatbots tend to be on that page and that's it. So once you leave that page, it kind of ends the session. Ours doesn't. It stands alone and it kind of walks with you, and you can still do many different engagement aspects, which you actually helped on programming for us, which is fantastic. The other one is that, as we did our new site, we transitioned from Sitecore into Drupal just last year. We had your team help us with getting the ADA compliance set up, where we had the speech to text, and that was huge, not only for people with disabilities, but also, as I mentioned, it was a 2-for-1, because now we use it in our call center, where people are just repeating the question of the caller, and they're able to have an answer immediately. So that cut back on the phone time that they were doing. And we're going forward, getting forward the live chat now. So that'll be done probably in a couple of weeks. Yeah. That'll be live and offered there. Yeah. And I think the tool is always going to be morphing. Every time we get on a call, it seems we I work with your team on a weekly basis in our Scrum calls, and I think that I always leave all of those management ones and thinking, oh, that's another thing we can do. We should be doing.
Yeah. And then you're not tied to the licensing costs associated with every user. So
No,
you're free to scale it across the organization, right? There's some
absolutely.
customization costs and infrastructure costs, but like it's much less than the licensing costs associated
Well,
with scaling.
exactly. And the way that our system is set up at Boston Children's Hospital is we have a lot of different areas that, we have the trust, we have our hospital, we've got the portal, we've got a referring physician portal. And, to your point, if this was a pro licensing thing, I would have to license that in all those areas and then also set it up in different areas too. I can actually set it up we've got a secure database where the main unit sits, and then we're able to spin up another instance of it inside that tool. So it's basically like, it's another room inside, another store inside the mall, basically, that we have set
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on maybe a couple more questions, and then we're going to take a couple questions.
Sure.
What's coming to mind is, I always enjoy understanding kind of your prioritization process because you have a lot of things. You're running digital transformation. You're mapping out all these things. This is one of them that came to the top. Like, how did you get this prioritized? And what do you recommend for others to do to get like a quick win if they want to do something similar?
Right. Well, especially in healthcare, the one learning I had coming from corporate America is that it's not just all administrative business type people. You've got administrative and you have clinical, and you're partnering all the way through on all of this. And so the first thing you need to do is that you need to have champions in either of those areas, whether it's the chief or it's a clinician that is somebody that is always looking your forward motion. And so exactly the way that we walked through earlier on how that chat was working in a session, what I did is I actually stood this up in our urology department, and then we went to a department heads meeting, and I had the clinician working with me, and we went through and showed that. And I think it was a big wow factor because we weren't even there to sell it; we were there to explain it, and people were just like, "I need it," because they saw it in motion. They saw that a patient was reaching out, and actually, I apologize. Urology was the second one. The first time we did it actually was with orthopedics. That's how fast it started to get momentum. We went to orthopedics, and we had it was an interesting story because the way that we did it, I tend to like to start off with a little bit of humor and some of the things, and so we were talking about the parent having issues with the child being clumsy, and then the child ended up having this problem with their arm, and and we were doing it real time, which is kind of, if you think about it, probably a little bit scary because, as we know, like you never want to do a real time presentation of things that could go wrong and happen. But we were fortunate that everything went well. And, we even had a person call out in the audience say, well, what if you misspell it? So they're trying to trunk it. And we were there. We had it because we knew that we had to program everything at least like 10 different ways because people do, fat finger things. They mistype it or they have their cap locks on. And so it worked perfectly fine. And, and it's really good to have that business partner with you in the clinical environment because they respect that person saying that this is what we're doing. This is working for us. And you really should be using it too. We left that meeting with just basically everybody like, when do we get it? So it was great. It wasn't like pushing it uphill. It's basically just, getting it out in front of them.
That's great. And kind of last question for me, and then we'll take a question here. How do you handle when people provide sensitive information? Like I think you talked about a case where you had some
Yeah.
people that are suicidal potentially using this system.
We do. Since the tool is available 24/7, and it's basically front and center. If people see it as support and they reach out to it and they want to like communicate with it, and we've had some delicate situations where people put in different things, and we want to make sure that we quickly triage when an incident occurred about a month ago, and we've had some other ones in the past, but nothing like this, and so we were able to go in and we have the ability to basically put in triggered keyword terms. And so we have that available and we put in a bunch of them. We work with very closely. We have a great legal and also our legal compliance and clinical staff because they're the front, people on the front lines and they're getting all the right keywords. They know what to have. So now the tool actually then escalates and says that, it sounds like, you need to contact this number so you can get somebody that can really help you with this. And then we're even looking down the road of how do we actually staff that accordingly, in the future. So it's not make a call to a hotline or a different clinic, but it's, getting a person live on the phone. And so we're doing that right now. And we're able to see if other words, like I said, the database does save different keywords that we don't maybe have track of. and we add that to its intellectual library the next day.
Yeah. Okay, so I've transitioned to a couple questions here that I'm
Sure.
seeing. Um, one of the questions is, how is content added to the chatbot? Is it centrally controlled, or do multiple departments add content?
So it's so I'm going to answer this in both. So it's all the departments add content, but it's centrally managed by people in my team because we need to get their learnings and their advice, but we also need to work with legal and compliance to help us scrub it to make sure that the answer is what we should be saying back to a patient, family, or referring physician or researcher. And then so we get all that information into a centralized database. My team takes it, they vet it, they scrub it, and then we go to the extension of writing questions that would answer that. So the way that the tool works is that, like I said, it has that heuristic, design where it looks for different, parts of the context. It pulls it out, and then it gives the respondent the best response answer on that. And so you have to make sure that, especially in healthcare, a lot of clinicians, they'll be using like the medical terminology, but a patient family might just use IBD or something for irritable bowel syndrome. So they're not going to have the whole description of it. So we have to make sure we cover that. And we've also the team that I have running this is fantastic. They even on their own started doing it in multiple languages. So we have context in French, Portuguese, Spanish, and we're constantly extending that on a regular basis. And to your point, circling back, which you asked earlier, what are we doing for the future? I think the future is even going to be is how do we merge in a tool like a Google Translate, into this, so that way we can actually have that real time for medical terminology. I think that would be a huge
Mm-hmm.
win because that would take
Mm-hmm.
people from reprogramming it to have it doing it automatically.
Yeah, yeah. And then another question here is, what does it really take to maintain this chatbot? Like, does it require a full-time person? Like, where does that person sit?
So the person sits in my department under digital, and it's one of those things. It's like most tools you set up. At first, it takes a village to get it all put together. When we first set this tool up, we had all of our web developers, all the content people, we had people in the departments that were having other things, and we had them all kind of come together and put all the different information they think would ask, and people are already asking on the phone lines today. We scrubbed the website for questions people were asking, made sure we had all of that. So the first couple of months, it was probably anywhere from like 5 to 10 people at a regular time just entering information in. They were trained to do that. But now I have my person that does reputation management also handles this tool because it's maybe about a half hour review every day on different things that pop up because it's more manageable now. All the big questions are on the system, and then we just look at it. And mainly, a lot of the time now is actually tied to what are the comments coming in, and is there any concern that we need to pass along to a department.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think we're at time here. So I wanted to let everybody know that if you'd like a copy of this presentation, just send me an email, brian@augustodigital.com. We'll also have this published on our website eventually here, and there'll be a form you could fill out to submit it. So if you'd like this presentation, please let us know. And then I also wanted to plug our next webinar. We're going to do the last part of our digital transformation series with Bill, and that is going to be focused on building winning digital transformation teams that quickly adapt to changing priorities, processes, technologies, and security requirements, which is always relevant in healthcare. So please join us. That's going to be August 16th for our third webinar with Bill. And with that, I just wanted to thank you and for joining, and also thank Bill for his time and his insight. If you have any questions, please let us know. And both I and Bill are available for consultations. If you need to talk, just reach out to me, and be happy to work through the process here of connecting the dots. So with that, just want to say thank you again. Appreciate everybody's time, and we'll see you next month.
Great. Thanks for having me,
Thank you.
Brian. Appreciate it. Take care.